Have you ever wondered how families managed to get by when money was practically worthless? The 1930s brought the worst economic collapse in American history, forcing millions to reinvent daily life with nothing but creativity and determination. Today we're exploring 25 remarkable survival strategies that kept our grandparents going through the darkest of times. Let's start with make do and mend. This wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was a way of life that transformed how Americans thought about clothing. When the Depression hit in 1929, new clothes became an impossible luxury for most families. A simple dress that cost $3 before the crash was completely out of reach, when the average worker, lucky enough to have a job, earned just $20 a week. Women became masters at extending the life of every garment. They'd carefully unpick worn collars and cuffs from men's shirts, flip them inside out, and re-sew them to get another year of wear. Flour sacks, which came printed with attractive patterns specifically for this purpose by 1930, became the fabric of choice for children's clothes and women's dresses. One Kansas farm wife recalled making her daughter's entire school wardrobe from chicken feed bags, carefully selecting matching patterns over several months of purchases. Patches weren't hidden. They became decorative elements, with mothers teaching daughters to embroider around repairs to make them beautiful. By 1935, government surveys showed that the average American family spent 75% less on clothing than they had in 1929. Yet people still managed to stay presentable through this incredible resourcefulness. Homemade cleaning products. Commercial cleaning supplies vanished from most households when every penny counted for food and shelter. But homes still needed to be clean, especially when poor nutrition made families more vulnerable to illness. The solution came from grandmother's old recipes, suddenly valuable again. A gallon of white vinegar cost just 15 cents in 1932 and could clean windows, floors, and countertops for months. Mixed with newspaper, which everyone had anyway, it left glass sparkling without streaks. Baking soda at 5 cents a box became the universal scrubber, tackling everything from bathtubs to teeth. Women would save wood ash from their stoves, mixing it with animal fat to create a harsh but effective lye soap that could clean anything from dishes to laundry. 1 tablespoon of ammonia in a bucket of water replaced expensive floor cleaners. These homemade solutions weren't just emergency substitutes. Many families discovered they worked better than store-bought products and continued using them long after the Depression ended. Recycling everything. Nothing, absolutely nothing, went to waste during the Depression. This wasn't environmental consciousness, it was pure survival. Old newspapers had at least a dozen uses after reading: window cleaning, fire starting, shoe stuffing to maintain shape, wrapping paper, shelf lining, and even toilet paper when cut into squares and hung on a nail. Glass jars from jam or pickles became drinking glasses, food storage, button holders, and even makeshift canning jars with carefully saved lids. Tin cans transformed into planters, scoops, cookie cutters, and children's toys. String from packages was carefully untied, never cut, wound into balls, and reused indefinitely. Even worn-out rubber boots found new life, cut into strips for jar seals, shaped into washers for leaky faucets, or used to resole shoes. Families kept separate boxes for different materials, one for buttons cut from worn-out clothes, another for fabric scraps, another for paper, creating an organized system for reusing everything. Make your own soap. Store-bought soap became an unaffordable luxury when Ivory soap cost 10 cents a bar, and that dime could buy a loaf of bread instead. Families revived the old pioneer practice of soap making, turning it into a precise science. Every scrap of animal fat was saved: bacon grease, beef tallow, even chicken fat, stored in coffee cans until there was enough for a batch. The process required careful attention. The fat was rendered and cleaned, then mixed with lye made from wood ash, or purchased for pennies when available. The dangerous chemical reaction demanded respect. Children were sent outside while mothers stirred the caustic mixture with long wooden paddles. After hours of cooking and stirring, the mixture was poured into wooden molds or old shoe boxes lined with cloth. The resulting soap was harsh enough to take skin off if used carelessly, but it cleaned everything from clothes to floors to people. One batch could last a family 3 months, representing savings of several dollars. Significant money when entire families lived on $10 a week. Seed saving. Every garden became a seed bank during the Depression, with families carefully preserving the means for next year's food supply. This wasn't casual gardening, it was strategic survival planning that required knowledge passed down through generations. Tomato seeds were scooped out, fermented for 3 days, to remove the germination-inhibiting gel, then dried on plates, labeled with variety and date. Bean and pea plants were left to dry completely on the vine, the pods harvested only when they rattled with mature seeds inside. Corn required special attention. The best ears were selected while still on the stalk, marked with cloth strips, and left to dry completely before harvesting. Families maintained detailed records in old ledgers, noting which varieties produced best, which resisted disease, and which tasted superior. Seeds were stored in paper envelopes inside tin boxes with tight lids, protected from mice and moisture. By 1935, a Department of Agriculture survey found that 85% of rural families and 45% of urban families saved seeds, representing millions of dollars in savings across the nation. Bartering. Money became almost irrelevant in many communities as elaborate barter networks replaced cash transactions. These weren't simple trades, but complex systems that sometimes involved 3 or 4 parties to complete. A farmer with extra eggs might trade them to the seamstress for mending work, who would trade that credit with the blacksmith for tool repair, who would then provide the farmer with sharpened plows. Towns developed informal exchanges where people posted what they had and what they needed. Skilled labor was especially valuable. A few hours of carpentry work could net a family a week's worth of vegetables. Doctors and dentists, unable to collect cash payments, accepted chickens, canned goods, and labor in trade. One Illinois dentist reported that in 1933, only 1 in 10 patients paid cash. The rest bartered everything from haircuts to homemade wine. Churches and schools became barter centers where families could trade children's outgrown clothes and shoes. These networks created bonds that lasted generations, with families remembering who helped them survive the hardest times. Leftovers for new meals. The concept of throwing away food became unthinkable when a quarter of the population faced real hunger. Monday's roast chicken, if a family was fortunate enough to have one, performed culinary magic throughout the week. Tuesday saw it become chicken salad with homemade mayonnaise and precious celery. Wednesday brought chicken soup from the carcass, simmered with saved vegetable peelings and a handful of barley. Thursday's meal might feature croquettes from the last meat scraps, mixed with mashed potatoes and fried in carefully saved bacon grease. Even the soup bones were cracked for their marrow, then given to dogs who were lucky to get them. Stale bread became bread pudding, French toast, or stuffing. Leftover vegetables went into bubble and squeak or mystery hash. Coffee grounds were dried and reused for a weaker second brewing. Potato water from boiling was saved for making bread, adding nutrients and improving texture. Restaurant owners noted that plate waste, common in the 1920s, virtually disappeared as people cleaned every morsel. Homemade furniture. When furniture stores stood empty and families couldn't afford basic necessities, creativity transformed cast-offs into functional homes. Orange crates from grocery stores became prized building materials. Stacked and arranged, they became bookcases, kitchen cabinets, and children's dressers. Covered with fabric salvaged from worn-out clothes, they could look almost elegant. One clever arrangement of 6 crates created a room divider with storage on both sides. Old doors laid across sawhorses became dining tables. Worn-out car seats, pulled from junkyards, were converted into porch furniture. Feed sacks stuffed with straw or corn husks became mattresses. Apple boxes turned upside down with a cushion on top served as ottoman storage. Families learned to upholster using old army blankets and recovered springs from abandoned furniture. The WPA Federal Art Project even published guides showing how to build attractive furniture from salvaged materials, legitimizing these creative solutions. Utilizing every part of the animal. When a family butchered an animal or received part of one through sharing, absolutely nothing went to waste. This was protein gold. The blood was caught and made into blood sausage or pudding, a tradition from European grandparents that found new relevance. Organ meats, often discarded in prosperity, became delicacies. Liver and onions, kidney pie, heart stew, and pickled tongue. Bones were boiled multiple times, first for soup stock, then again for dog food, finally cracked for marrow, and eventually ground for garden fertilizer. Fat was rendered into lard for cooking and soap making. Pig intestines became sausage casings. Chicken feet were cleaned and boiled for the collagen-rich broth, believed to cure everything from colds to joint pain. Feathers were saved for pillows and quilts. Even the hide was preserved, either sold to tanners for a few cents or brain-tanned at home for leather. Rural families often scheduled butchering as community events, sharing the work and dividing the meat before refrigeration could spoil it. Make your own clothes. Sewing machines, whether ancient treadle models or precious electric ones, became the most important appliance in Depression homes. These weren't occasional craft projects, but essential production centers that kept families clothed. Women would carefully take apart worn adult clothes, using the paper pattern pieces to cut smaller versions for children. A man's worn suit could become a boy's Sunday outfit with careful cutting and patient reconstruction. The government distributed free patterns through county extension offices, designed specifically to maximize fabric use from standard feed sack sizes. Knitting needles clicked constantly as women unraveled worn sweaters to re-knit into children's clothes, adding length to sleeves and hems as children grew. One ball of yarn might make mittens for the whole family if carefully planned. Socks were knitted top down, so worn heels and toes could be re-knit without losing the whole sock. By 1934, Singer's Sewing Machine Company reported that fabric sales had increased 40%, even as clothing sales plummeted, showing how Americans had shifted to making rather than buying. Cheap meals. Feeding a family on almost nothing required encyclopedic knowledge of economical cooking that modern chefs would admire. The infamous Hoover stew combined whatever was available, usually thin soup with any available vegetables, but families developed far more creative solutions. Beans, bought dried in bulk for pennies per pound, became the foundation of countless meals. Soaked overnight and cooked with a ham bone begged from the butcher, they provided protein for days. Rice at 5 cents a pound stretched any meal. Cornmeal, even cheaper, became cornbread, mush, polenta, and coating for fried anything. Mothers learned that adding a tablespoon of vinegar to tough meat during cooking would tenderize it, making even the cheapest cuts edible. Gravy, made from any drippings and flour, could make sawdust palatable, people joked. One Minnesota family survived an entire winter primarily on potatoes, lard, and flour, managing to create dozens of different dishes from these 3 ingredients through creative seasoning with foraged herbs. Homemade ice cream. The hand-cranked ice cream maker became a symbol of Depression ingenuity, proving that families could create joy despite hardship. The physics was simple, but the execution required teamwork. Rock salt lowered the freezing point of ice, allowing the cream mixture to freeze as family members took turns cranking. Basic recipes used just cream, sugar, and vanilla, but creative cooks substituted evaporated milk when cream was too expensive, added honey when sugar ran low, and flavored with everything from wild berries to coffee. Winter meant snow ice cream, made instantly by mixing snow with sweetened condensed milk. The ice itself came from winter harvesting, where families cut blocks from frozen ponds and stored them in sawdust-insulated ice houses. Some entrepreneurial families sold portions at church socials for a penny a scoop. The wooden bucket and metal canister were treasured possessions, often shared among several families for special occasions. Turn old newspapers into insulation. Heating costs could destroy a family budget when coal cost $7 a ton and wages might be $5 a week. Newspapers became crucial insulation material, providing warmth that meant survival. Families developed systematic approaches. Papers were layered between wall studs in unfinished walls, creating dead air spaces that blocked cold. Carefully folded newspapers were fitted around windows and under doors to stop drafts. Whole newspapers were spread between mattresses and springs for warmth. Children wore newspapers inside their coats, the trapped air providing remarkable insulation. Wet newspapers mixed with flour paste were pressed into cracks and painted over, sealing drafts permanently. Attics were lined with overlapping newspapers held down with salvaged wood strips. Some families created removable window insulation by gluing newspapers to cardboard, installed each night for warmth. The practice was so common that newspapers published articles about their secondary use as insulation, with the Chicago Tribune claiming their Sunday edition alone could insulate a small room. Using every bit of a fruit or vegetable. Nothing edible reached the garbage pail when every calorie counted. Apple peels and cores became jelly or vinegar. Watermelon rinds were pickled into a sweet relish that lasted months. Corn cobs flavored soup stocks before becoming kindling. Carrot tops were chopped fine for salads or soup garnish. Potato peels, cleaned and seasoned, were baked into crispy snacks. Citrus peels were candied with precious sugar or dried for zest. Tomato skins were dried and ground into powder for flavoring winter soups. Beet greens, usually discarded, were cooked like spinach. Celery leaves were dried for seasoning. Pumpkin seeds were roasted for protein-rich snacks. Even banana peels found use. Some families learned to cook them Caribbean style or dry them for garden fertilizer. The USDA published pamphlets teaching these techniques, acknowledging that what was once considered waste could provide essential nutrition. Grow your own food. Victory gardens wouldn't become famous until World War II, but Depression gardens were the true survival plots. Every available space became productive. Front yards, vacant lots, even rooftops in cities. Families chose vegetables for maximum calories per square foot: potatoes, beans, squash, and cabbage. Vertical growing maximized space with poles for beans and trellises for tomatoes. Succession planting meant harvesting lettuce while tomatoes grew above. Community gardens sprouted in cities where families shared tools, knowledge, and labor. Detroit alone had 5,000 community gardens by 1932. Seeds were started indoors in cut-down milk cartons and tin cans months before the last frost. Cold frames built from old windows extended growing seasons by months. Families learned companion planting from agricultural bulletins, beans fixing nitrogen for corn, marigolds deterring pests. Root cellars, or just cool basements, stored hundreds of pounds of produce through winter. By 1934, government estimates suggested home gardens produced $500 million worth of food nationally. Patch up leaky roofs. Professional roof repair was a fantasy when families couldn't afford food, forcing creative solutions to keep rain out. Tar paper, if available for 50 cents a roll, could patch holes temporarily. More often, families improvised with whatever was at hand. Old tin cans were flattened and nailed over holes like metallic shingles. Canvas from worn-out tents or tarps was stretched and sealed with homemade pine pitch. Worn linoleum from kitchen floors found second life as roofing material. In desperate situations, thick layers of newspapers were pasted down with flour paste and painted with used motor oil for waterproofing. Cedar shingles were carved from salvaged wood by those with skill and patience. Moss was gathered and packed into leaks, swelling when wet to seal gaps. Some families mixed cement with sawdust to create a primitive but effective patching compound. These repairs might not last long, but they kept families dry until better times or better materials appeared. Darning socks. The humble darning egg, a wooden or ceramic oval, became essential equipment in every household as sock replacement became impossible for most families. Darning wasn't simple mending, but an art form that could extend sock life indefinitely. Mothers taught daughters to catch thin spots before they became holes, weaving reinforcement that prevented damage. When holes appeared, careful darning created new fabric from thread, woven in perpendicular patterns that were sometimes stronger than the original. Different weights of thread were saved specifically for darning, heavy for heels, fine for toes. The process was meditative, often done while listening to radio programs in the evening. Darning parties became social events where women shared techniques and conversation while repairing family socks. One Iowa woman claimed she'd darned the same pair of her husband's work socks for 6 years, replacing heels and toes multiple times until only the top band remained original. Children learned young, practicing on dish towels before graduating to actual socks. Make your own toys. Children of the Depression played with creations that would cost hundreds in today's artisan toy shops, all made from scraps and imagination. Corn cob dolls, dressed in fabric scraps, populated elaborate dollhouses made from cardboard boxes. Spool tanks rolled across floors, powered by rubber bands and matchsticks. Tin can telephones connected houses with salvaged wire. Button collections became games, sorted and traded like treasure. Clothespin dolls, painted with berry juice and dressed in handkerchief ball gowns, attended tea parties. Boys carved elaborate slingshots from forked branches, toys that also contributed to the dinner pot when aimed at rabbits or squirrels. Stilts from old lumber and large tin cans provided hours of entertainment. Jump ropes were braided from worn-out stockings. Even the simplest materials became magical. A large cardboard box could be a fort, ship, or airplane with imagination. These homemade toys fostered creativity and problem-solving skills that shaped an entire generation's approach to life. Borrowing items. Tool libraries existed decades before the modern sharing economy, born from Depression necessity. Expensive items like saws, hammers, and especially specialized tools were shared among entire neighborhoods. Families kept mental catalogs of who owned what. Mrs. Johnson had the good scissors, Mr. Peterson the saw, the Smiths had canning equipment. Borrowing etiquette was strict. Items were returned promptly, clean, and in better condition if possible. Breaking someone's tool meant replacing it, even if it took months of saving. Sewing machines were scheduled like modern computer labs, with families signing up for time slots. Pressure canners circulated during harvest season with military precision. Wedding dresses were community property, altered and re-altered for dozens of brides. Even false teeth were shared among family members for important photographs. This sharing created networks of mutual dependence that strengthened communities. Churches often became equipment exchanges, coordinating loans, and maintaining shared items. Use leftover fat for cooking. The bacon grease can on the back of every stove represented liquid gold in Depression kitchens. Every drop of animal fat was captured, filtered, and stored with religious devotion. Bacon grease was the premium, adding flavor to everything from eggs to popcorn. Chicken fat, called schmaltz, by Jewish families who elevated its use to an art form, made the flakiest pie crusts. Beef tallow was harder and perfect for frying at high temperatures. Even fish oil was saved by coastal families for cooking other seafood. The fat was carefully filtered through cheesecloth while hot to remove particles, then stored in covered containers. Different fats were kept separate, as each had unique properties and flavors. This wasn't just economy, but gastronomy. Vegetables roasted in beef drippings tasted infinitely better than those cooked in whatever oil might have been available. Restaurants saved and sold their excess fat, with some families buying quarts for pennies to use at home. Sewing buttons and replacing zippers. Button boxes were treasuries in every home, holding decades of salvaged fasteners that could rescue any garment. Before discarding any worn-out clothing, every button was carefully cut off and saved. These collections, often inherited from mothers and grandmothers, contained buttons of bone, shell, wood, glass, and precious bakelite. When shirts lost buttons, replacements were found that might not match perfectly, but kept clothes wearable. Broken zippers, relatively new technology in the 1930s and impossible to replace for most, were fixed with infinite patience. Individual teeth were repaired with pliers and wire. When zippers failed completely, they were replaced with buttons or hooks, and eyes salvaged from other garments. Women learned to make thread buttons, wrapping thread around and around to create functional fasteners when nothing else was available. Safety pins became universal fixers, holding together everything from diapers to dress straps. The skill of moving buttons to accommodate growing children or weight changes extended the life of garments for years. Making homemade candles. Electric lights were luxuries that many families couldn't afford even if they had electricity, making candles essential for evening activities. Every scrap of wax was saved, from cheese coatings to the stubs of burned-down candles. Tallow candles made from carefully rendered beef fat provided steady, if smoky, light. The process required patience, melting the fat, straining out impurities, and repeatedly dipping cotton string wicks to build up layers. Beeswax, when available from local beekeepers, was mixed with tallow to reduce smoking and add pleasant scent. Bayberry candles, made from boiling the berries of bayberry shrubs, were special occasion treats that took pounds of berries to make just one candle. Some families learned to make rush lights, ancient lighting technology using dried rushes dipped in fat. Birthday candles were carefully extinguished and saved for multiple uses. During summer, families often went to bed with daylight to save candles for winter's long darkness. Repurposing old jars. Glass jars achieved holy status during the Depression, never discarded and often fought over at estate sales. Mason jars were gold, but any jar with a lid was treasure. They stored everything imaginable: buttons sorted by size, nails organized by length, seeds labeled by year, and precious sugar and flour safe from pests. Jars became lunch boxes, with hot soup staying warm, wrapped in newspapers. They were vases for wildflowers, penny banks with slots cut in lids, and bug catchers for children. Large jars became miniature greenhouses for starting seeds. Broken jars were carefully broken further into useful pieces. The bottoms became ashtrays or soap dishes, the tops funnels. Jar lids alone had dozens of uses: plant saucers, coasters, templates for drawing circles. Women discovered that different-sized jar mouths made perfect cookie cutters. The value of jars was so recognized that some stores gave credit for returns, one of the earliest recycling programs. Rainwater harvesting. Every drop of rain was captured in elaborate systems that would impress modern environmentalists. Gutters, often homemade from split logs or bent tin, directed roof runoff into barrels, wash tubs, or any available container. The first flush of rain, which cleaned dirt from roofs, was directed away through clever pivoting pipes. Clean rainwater was soft, requiring less soap for washing, and was prized for shampooing hair. Families positioned containers strategically to catch drips from trees. In drought years, even morning dew was collected with sheets spread on grass overnight, then wrung into buckets. This water served multiple purposes. First for washing dishes, that water then for mopping floors, finally for watering gardens. Soap-free rinse water went directly to vegetable plots. Winter snow was melted for water when pipes froze. Some families built cisterns, underground storage tanks that could hold thousands of gallons for dry periods. This water consciousness created habits that lasted lifetimes. Cutting down on heat by layering clothes. Heating bills could destroy family budgets, forcing creative solutions that kept people warm without burning precious coal or wood. The layering system wasn't random, but scientific. Cotton undershirts absorbed perspiration. Wool sweaters, often several at once, provided insulation. Outer layers of whatever was available blocked wind. Newspapers were worn between layers, the trapped air providing remarkable insulation. Families dressed fully for bed, wearing hats and mittens indoors during coldest periods. Children did homework wearing coats and gloves, pencils gripped awkwardly through wool. Families gathered in one room, closing off the rest of the house, their combined body heat raising temperature. Hot water bottles, filled from kettles on the stove, warmed beds before sleeping. Heated bricks wrapped in cloth served the same purpose. Feet were wrapped in newspapers inside shoes for extra warmth. This wasn't just economy, but survival, when temperatures in unheated bedrooms could drop below freezing. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed discovering these 25 ingenious survival strategies, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.